All right, now that I've done my sketch, I have to do what we've been doing with our landscape assignment. I don't need to really look at my inspiration much anymore. I can realize, oh, I don't have too much snake in here, so I can make little notes. What if the tail is a snake, right? And I can always make little notes like snake, parrot, because I want a lot of color, will be the wings, pangolin. We need at least 5, right? 5 different sources. Chicken, jaguar, or panther, or puma, or something. Ocelot, whatever works. All right, so now we have that. I am going to, because I sketch digitally, I don't need to take a photo of it and then post the photo. I just need to save this as a JPEG, right? So I'm going to say File, Export as a JPEG, Save. It's going to go to Downloads because I'm doing this in Photopea. And then I put it into my Assignment 2 master folder. And I mark it orange, because that is what I mark things that go into Canvas that are online formats, either JPEGs or PNGs. That's what we've learned so far. So the inspiration is optional to post. Your description is optional but helpful, but this is the first requirement. And it's a good idea to post it as soon as you have it. Requirement 1, your skeletal, it's just a planning sketch, but it's a skeletal template planning sketch. If you're trying to match a Pokemon, it can be fun to put an image of the Pokemon in with your sketch. And if you're ever wondering what the requirements are for any assignment, and you don't have to go through the videos or raise your hand in class, I always show them with the past student example. So the requirements for this one, just like they were for assignment 1, is your planning sketch and then your finished composite. Those are the 2 things you need to meet the requirements. And you need to use at least 5 different references, and you need to make it look as believable as possible. And believable as possible means that the edges are clean, the references match. We'll be learning all of that, but also that the structure makes sense. You know, that it feels like there's a structure inside so that they can move and be posed to fit into an environment. So it's a little bit harder than our sketch for the landscape. And now I'll just drag and drop that sketch in as a JPEG, and then, very important, got to shrink it to fit the space. No bigger than 4 times the size of the name, right? So if I take requirement as the name, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's as big as I should post it. Some of you posted too small, honestly, with your assignment 1. So make it at least double the size of your name, because otherwise the pixel resolution is not doing your work any justice when I zoom in to score it. So you can, for your portfolio projects, you can go 4 times the size of your name. All right. Now, what do we do with that sketch? Well, we're going to open it up in Photopea. And because mine is multiple layers, I'm just going to go ahead and flatten that. But this is just like if you open up your photograph in Photopea. And the problem is, I don't need all parts of my sketch. So how do I create guides to frame in just the part of the sketch that I want to design to print? So before I crop, I'm going to crop, but I'm going to use guides to help my crop, because crop's dangerous, right? Yeah. So I can use guides by using the Move tool, clicking on the rulers. If the rulers aren't there, you can hit Command R. And I kind of frame around my sketch. And that shows me, oh, my sketch isn't very straight. My sketch is way too tilted, right? So what can I do? Well, I can select all of it, select all, and I can hit Option Command T and transform it. The problem is when I try to transform the background, it will say it's locked. And I can either unlock the background by renaming it, because the background always has to be a locked layer, or I can simply duplicate the whole thing, Command J, and then Option Command T, and that allows me to rotate it. And maybe I even want to rotate it a little extra because I kind of like having the head higher than the hips. Okay, now I'm going to crop it. I'm going to use the crop tool, and I'm going to push those crop guides or the crop transform box into my guides, and it should lock to them. Sometimes I need to go a little bit closer. I'll go a little bit closer because I tilted it. Good. And then I'll use the move tool, move my guides right to that edge. Remember, even though we cropped, which in Photoshop would get rid of any information outside of the crop, in Photopea it still remembers that information for some reason. But we need to crop it so that we can control the pixel dimensions of our intended project. This is like choosing the paper size for our collage. So now I've cropped it so that my creature is nicely fitting within a box. I don't have a lot of extra space. Then I go to image size to fix the pixel space. And what do? I change pixels to inches, and I make it at least 8 by 10. It's almost there, but not quite. So I'm going to go ahead and make the height 9 inches. Click on the gray, and because the padlock is there, this is going to be 9 by 11 inches. That's larger than 8 by 10. You don't want anything smaller than 8. And you don't want something that's 8 by 9. You need it to be at least 8 by 10. So if you're doing a square, it needs to be at least 10 by 10. And then for pixels per inch, not DPI, but pixels per inch, I don't want 72, which is standard minimum screen resolution. I want standard minimum print resolution. It's one of our learning outcomes. We need to be able to design for print. So what is that number? 300. It has to be 300 or below. 300 or above. Sometimes if I'm feeling very confident in my computer, I'll go ahead and say 350. That's what I call my studio resolution. And that's how I'll do professional work, so that the designers can then scale it up a little bit from the intention if that's needed for the project. But if I were to do 600, that's just a waste of processing power. So it just blew it up, right? I had to create a lot of pixels. And even though this was digitally drawn, it can do that pretty cleanly, but you can see how it softens every edge. That's fine, because this is just planning. What we don't want that to happen to is our photo reference. So that's why we make the pixel space the right size, the right number of pixels first, before we start bringing things in. And once I start bringing reference in, like my Jaguar head, it might be huge, right? And then this shows me, my sketch shows me about the size I need it. No bigger needed than that, for sure. But the problem is, if I start bringing all these in, here's my pangolin body. It's pretty big. And I put it in, and I put it underneath the head, right? So the problem is, I start to cover up my sketch right away. So just like we did with our landscape, this image, which is at least 8 by 10 by 300 pixels per inch, that's just our art space. We need a desk space to work on and organize things. And instead of the metaphor of a collage with magazines, we're going to use the metaphor of building a car on a factory floor for this. Because we'll actually do it in different parts and then bring them together. So I go to image canvas size. This grows around my pixel space. And we're always going to use the same canvas size, which is the largest size of a printable piece of paper on professional printing presses. And that is 30 by 40 inches. So 40 inches wide by 30 inches tall. This does not mean that our art project is 30 by 40 inches. It means that the desk space around our art project is 30 by 40 inches. When I do that, because Photopea doesn't lose the information that I crop, all that information shows up again. So how do we get rid of it? Because it's annoying. We use our rectangular select tool, and we stick to the guides, and then we hit Command J to duplicate, and then we delete those background layers. Almost there. There we go. Now, because that checkerboard, which shows that there's no pixels there, really can give you a headache, we're going to create a new layer We're going to move it behind our sketch, and we're going to edit fill with gray, just like we did for our landscapes. And so how do you know you have the right resolution? Your pixels should be 14,000 by 100 and by 10,500. 14,000 by 10,500. Or something close to that. Mine's 350. You could do it by 300, but it needs to be 30 by 40 inches. But your artwork should be floating in the middle of that, right? So it's like your artwork is on a desk, and then on that desk, you can move around your body reference to one place and your head reference to another. Just like parts of a car being built in different places on a factory floor. All right, now I'm ready to save my work. So I say File, Save as PSD, and we always save with our name and then a description. So I'm going to call it Karl Assignment 2 Flying Jaguar. I can save it to the desktop, but even better, to navigate it to my Assignment 2 folder, so it saves there, and then every time I hit Command S, it will update it there. The other option is to save it to the desktop, then close Photopea, and then open Photopea, and then open it from my folder. Like move it from the desktop to my folder. So any way you can stay organized, but you don't want multiple copies of it floating around. So right now, it's right there. I'm going to mark it as green. So I have my sketch marked as orange. That's what went into Canvas. And now I've started my project with multiple layers, marked it as green in Photopea. Now I get to bring in my references. Am I going to bring in all my references? Probably not. I'm going to bring in the ones I think are most useful. So I have bird wings. Very helpful. And if we learn from R.J. Palmer, he says organize your stuff. That's always the number one tip. So if I wanted to organize this further, I could. I can organize it into head things. I could put all the head references into one folder. I could put all the body references into another, all the wing references into another, all the tail references into another. It just depends what you need. And that's what I did for the morning class. I don't think I need it so much for this one. I have the snake reference for the tail. And sometimes you get reference that's already cut out for you. So that's nice. I thought it would be cool to have some spines on the back. And so I have these iguana references. And you know what I love from iguanas? I love the eyes. And chameleons. Such expressive eyes. Ooh. So sometimes you're going to use it just for something like that. And before I hit return, remember these are still smart objects. It comes in with a smart transform box, so I can right click, I can flip it horizontally because I know the head's going to be facing that way. I can tilt it, and I can shrink it. All before I do my rough cutout. Because jaguars are cool, but I don't think I want to use just the whole head of this jaguar. Because then it just looks like the head of an animal on something else. So I always try to build my head out of at least two different references. It will look more interesting that way. So I'll be blending my jaguar with this iguana. Okay, so now what do I have? I have head. I have kind of muzzle, an eye, maybe some spikes. I've got the front chassis, which I always recommend you get from one reference, which is the collarbone through to the elbows. If that comes from all one reference, whether it's a grizzly bear, whether it's a whale, right, then all of that will feel connected. Whereas if you take that from different references, they'll often feel kind of broken. I also have the wings, and I have that all connected from one. So even though I'm not using the parrot's head, I'm going to use the full connection between the wings and then add that onto the body. And I've got the rib cage, and really all in this one, I've also got hips, but I need the chicken feet.